Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, however you're watching, wherever you're watching, however you listen, wherever you listen. It's the Bet Online Salute Detroit podcast. It's Monday. We got 2/3 of the tripod here. Bet Online, betonline.ag. Go to betonline.ag. Get all your up-to-date live stats, odds, and everything you need for betting and get your money in. Also brought to you by Underdog Fantasy. Underdog Fantasy. Go to underdogfantasy.com or the Underdog Fantasy app. Put in promo code USCLAFV. Take fantasy football to the next level. Madman, how are you doing on this Monday?
Doing well, Coach. Great to see you. Feels like it's been a refreshing week, off of the bye. It was kind of nice to watch football Saturday and Sunday without, kind of skin in the game and just sort of be able to enjoy it. So that was refreshing. And now here we are. Final third of the season here, Coach. Final quarter of the season, I should say. Final 3 games. And it's a sprint to the finish over the next 19 days here, our final 3 games of the regular season. So excited to get into it with you.
Yeah, it was like a true vacation. Like we didn't have to worry about no SC stuff or anything like that. Before we get going, we lost a legendary coach. We lost John Robinson today. I just learned this. He was not the head coach. He was the head coach at SC. Don't forget, but he was the offensive coordinator for John Makai. So it kind of makes sense, like where he got his winning ways from. He's one of the pillars of USC. I will always say, like he laid down the foundation. When you think of SC, you think of Makai, Robinson, Carroll. Great guy, will be missed. Lived a good one. Lived until 89 years old.
Yeah.
So everything we read about in the history books, he probably saw firsthand, or a good majority of it. So it says he was born in 1935. So from World War II all the way until now. So he saw a lot.
No doubt,
He's seen a lot. So definitely. You got anything on Coach
No,
Robinson?
I mean, just an iconic Trojan. I mean, to your point, Coach, I think there's like 4 distinct periods of USC football history, right? I mean, we have to start with the Howard Jones era in the 30s and 40s. Then obviously the Makai era of the 60s and 70s. And John Robinson was Makay's right-hand man as offensive coordinator and then became the head coach for that last 78 national title team. Then, of course, the Carroll era as the last great era of USC football. But John Robinson, really unique distinction about his place in L.A., Coach. 78 national championship team of USC. Then he was the coach of the Rams from 83 to 91 and then came back to be the coach of SC. He was the coach of that 95 Rose Bowl team with Keyshawn. So it sort of bookended 2 separate, triumphs with USC. He'll be deeply missed and, sad day in Trojan family, but I'm, wishing him and his family all the condolences in the world, a true Trojan legend and icon. And, yet another kind of sad day for USC, Coach, as we start losing more and more folks from that lineage, and that connectivity of some of the great times. But rest in peace, Coach Robinson, and our thoughts and prayers are with you and your family.
Definitely rest in peace. Another Trojan going to the ultimate Rose Bowl, right?
Yes, the ultimate Rose Bowl.
Going on to the ultimate Rose Bowl, so definitely transforming in. I would like to file a grievance, Madman. I want to file a grievance, and I mentioned this before, and it's crazy how like I mention things and then like it just starts to play out. I don't know. I think I'm like the next Nostradamus. And now I'm just joking. But so I don't know if you remember this, but I said the media has a lot of influence on where teams play out and where teams lay out and how people think of conferences and things like that, right? So this weekend, Miami lost a close game to Georgia Tech, which is a tough football team. I'm not taking anything from Georgia Tech. Miami still controls their own destiny, but Miami's now 3rd place in their conference, right? Miami has to win their conference in order to make the college football playoff. I don't think that's fair. I don't think that it's fair that 2 conferences get the bulk of the seeding and then other conferences only get 1. And this is why I don't think it's fair. And I know fairs are for rides and petting zoos. I understand that. But all I'm saying is it's not Miami's fault they're in the ACC, right? It's not. At one point, it wasn't SC's fault they were in the Pac-10. Like, that's the conference that they're in. not their fault. It's the hand they were dealt. But when you look at the ACC, there's a 7-2 team, a 9-1 team, and an 8-1 team. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 teams with winning records and a possibility of winning 10 games, 9 to 10 games. So it's a fairly competitive conference, I will say, right? Why is only one team out of that conference only able to go to the playoff? There's 4 teams, that are nationally ranked. Louisville, it's not, let's take Louisville out of it. So 3 teams that are nationally ranked in the top 20, but only one team is going to the college football playoff because they're of the conference that they're in. You take this scenario and you move it to the Big Ten or the SEC, all of them automatically get in. How is that right? They still, I don't think they still got it. I will say this, and I could be wrong, but I'm going to say this. This is influence of ESPN. I'm going to put the conference, the network out there. I'm sorry. I hope we don't get kicked off YouTube, but this is big network influence, especially with Big Ten, because their footprint is CBS, NBC, Fox. They have the biggest footprint out of anybody. But like, how can you justify this to kids who worked all summer, all spring, and say, you lost the game, the ball rolled the wrong way, wasn't your day that day, so you don't get in the playoff. But the other conference where they had worse losses than you and multiple terrible games, they get an opportunity to be in the playoff. How is that right, and how do you make it right? And I know you're going to say strength of schedule and all that. They're all on scholarship. They're all Division I athletes. You can't tell me Cam Ward isn't as good as anybody in the SEC or the Big Ten, right? So that has nothing to do with it. Let's take that out. These are Power 4 schools. Like, what? I can't justify it in my mind. Go ahead, no,
Coach. I mean, it's a fair point. I mean, I think there's a couple of things to sort of look at this, right? I mean, there's a Power 4, but there's really a Super 2 with the SEC and the Big Ten. There's a 12-team playoff scenario here. I think presumably the way this is going to break down is the SEC is going to get 4 bids. The Big Ten is going to get 4 bids. The Big 12 is going to get an automatic champion. The ACC is going to get an automatic champion. There's going to be the highest group of 5 conference champion, and then presumably Notre Dame. That's where this 12 sort of breaks down. And I think to your point, it's pretty obvious, Coach, I think from the eye test that the Big 12 is sort of a lesser conference than the other 3. I think just watching the teams, watching the games, it's fairly obvious that just the depth of quality of football in that conference, there's a pretty significant gap between that and the Big Ten, the SEC, and the ACC, where, to your point, it gets interesting with the ACC is, you know, are they more like the Big 12 or are they more like the Big 10 or the SEC? And look, I mean, on paper, I think you're bringing up a great point that you've got 4 or 5 teams that are top 25 or fringe top 25. So why should that be treated differently than, say, you know, the SEC or the Big Ten, where there's such a logjam? And I think it's a fair point. The ACC's got a couple of things that are sort of working against it, Coach. One is because they're not having everyone kind of play everyone from sort of a divisional standpoint, you're getting these weird scenarios where perhaps records are getting inflated because not every quality team in the ACC is playing other quality teams in the ACC. So that's kind of number one. So the question is there some inflation taking place there? Number 2, Coach, I think the ACC has really struggled, to your point about ESPN, when it comes to non-conference. I mean, let's think about the marquee game. One of the marquee games at the start of the season was Clemson-Georgia. And Georgia just destroyed Clemson 34-3. I mean, that wasn't even a game. And so that, I think, really put the ACC on its heels from a legitimacy standpoint, because I think presumably the thought was, well, it's Miami and Clemson and then kind of everybody else. And now if Clemson is so significantly behind an SEC power, how good really is the ACC? So even if Miami's really good, then they should be able to win that conference, no problem, and they're going to get in, but no one else is really that good. So it's sort of self-correcting in that way. And then I think with Miami, I think the struggle has been, obviously they lost to a really good Georgia Tech team, but I think there's sort of a national perception that they probably should have lost the Cal game, and there was some calls there where they got hosed at the end, and Cal's not a very good team. This is a sub-500 team. So how good are you when you're losing that game? They got real close in that Virginia Tech game. I mean, there was a thought that The game was already over on that Hail Mary. So Miami has sort of played it really close in a few games and sort of escaped and now finally got nipped. So I think there's some questions about, hey, they're really talented, but is there a consistency there in the same way that there is in the SEC and in the Big Ten? And then in the case of Clemson, I think they've had to just struggle to sort of reclaim legitimacy. They got blown out by Georgia, then played a lot of lesser games, looked really good, and then got absolutely crushed by Louisville at home. So there's sort of a question about Clemson. Now, they play Pitt. That's kind of an elimination game within the ACC. Louisville's kind of a fringe top 25 team. And then I think the wild card is SMU, Coach. You know, how does SMU sort of fit into all of this? But I think to your point, the ACC probably has a gripe here that should they only be a one-bid conference. Now, the way that sort of presumably gets fixed is, let's say Notre Dame falls out of the top 12. That now opens up another spot. Do you go second ACC team, or do you go potentially a fifth SEC team, right? I think it's pretty clear in the Big Ten. You've got the 4 teams in the Big Ten, and there's a big gap after that. I'll tell you something, Coach, hot take. 5th best team in the Big Ten right now, UCLA.
UCLA. Yeah. That's not a hot take. That's a fact.
UCLA is the 5th best team in the Big Ten.
I could argue with one team with that, and it's close, though. It's like 5A, 5B. Illinois is pretty tough, too.
Illinois, UCLA, but neither of those teams you would say are top 12 playoff caliber. So the Big Ten is pretty locked at 4. So then the question becomes, do you go SEC with 5, or do you go ACC with 2? And I think if Georgia beats Tennessee this week, and everyone's got kind of the 2 losses, and they're so bunched together, I think that you'll stop at 4 with the SEC, and then I think it opens the door for the ACC to get 2, and everything sort of works itself out, assuming Notre Dame trips up against either Army or SC, and it opens the door. So I think it's a fair point, Coach, but I think it is very clear from the eye test and from sort of a depth perspective that the Big Ten and the SEC are clearly above everybody else. And where the ACC kind of lies on that spectrum, let's see how it sort of shakes out these next few weeks.
I will tell you this, and we'll move on. I'm going to give you my hot take. If the Raging Cajuns go undefeated, they deserve the at-large bid. I don't care what you say. I don't care if Gentry's the Heisman Trophy winner. They lost the game. If they go undefeated, they deserve the that's what they were supposed to do it for. That's the best team.
Right. Yeah,
it's supposed to get it.
I mean, it's an interesting point, Coach, because that's a hard one. If Boise State finishes running the table and they finish up 11-1, and their only loss was to the number 1 ranked team in the country in their building by 3, to sort of keep them out, I think would be really difficult, and then the logic has to sort of step in where it's like, well, if Oregon played Louisiana, what does that score look like in Eugene, right? And so that's where it's an imperfect system. But certainly 12 is a lot more equitable than 4. That's for sure. So, the sport is evolving. And then, of course, in 26, Coach, we go from 12 to 14. So, in a 14-team scenario, like if we look at this year in a 14-team scenario, ACC probably gets a second bid, and then you probably have an opportunity for another group of 5 team.
How long before we get to 64 and 2 playing?
We're headed there.
There's not enough time on the calendar to ever get there. Let's move forward. Let's move over to the recruiting gossip news, man. So, on 3 reports, Corday and Julian is talking about going to Colorado. Their crystal ball to go to Colorado, which is starting to look like crystal ball to go to Florida State, right?
Right.
I don't know if we're not breaking that, but we know about it probably before. People are going to go look like, what do you mean Florida State? But it's looking like crystal ball to go Florida State. If that happens, though, I'm going to be pissed. Not because they're going to Florida State. The reason why they're going to Florida State, I'm going to be pissed. I had a little side. I had a conversation with my friend who's coaching, and he said the same thing I say. He's like, think of all the hours we put in, all the time we spend and everything, and here's where we are. And he just jumps in, and all of a sudden, this is where, like, pissed. Born on 3rd, thought he hit a triple. That's all I'm going to say. That's all I'm going to say. Neither here nor there. So I was thinking about this today because this was kind of like the hot news over the weekend too. And I was texting you guys earlier. I don't think losing Julian Lewis is a big deal. The way the years fall, right? And Ryan mentioned something in our text. He said, well, if Maeva has a bad 3 games, and my counter to that was, we can't throw him away after a bad 3 games when you get a full spring and a full fall. So Maeva's a starter for 25, right? Let's say Maeva lights it up. Let's be optimistic. Let's be, right? He fits in Lincoln Riley's system. Let's say he's the next Caleb Williams of SC. He wins the Heisman. He's draft eligible. He goes and he becomes a top 5 pick. I won't say first overall. He becomes a top 5 pick, right? One of the top quarterbacks taken off the board. Then we have Ryder Lyons coming in 26. I don't know if you guys ever seen Ryder Lyons play, but Ryder Lyons is something different. This kid is something I'm more excited about, and I think Ryder Lyons is fully committed to SC because of family lineage and family ties. I think he really wants to be a Trojan because he's a California kid. Ryder Lyons is special. I think Julian's leaving because I don't think there's no room for him, right? We don't have a 27 guy. Even if if Julian does come, I think Ryder will wait his turn out, which would be 3 years, and then that'll be plug and play. But there's no 27 guy, no 28 guy. I don't think losing Julian Lewis is a big deal. We have a guy. We'll find out how good he is this upcoming Saturday. We have a 26 guy. We need to start looking for 27, 28. I don't think the sky's falling on this one, Madman. I think we're okay. Like, if he comes, he comes. If he doesn't, he doesn't. I'm starting to see a lot of people say he just doesn't. It was a tweet that was sent to us. I don't think you saw it, but I saw it. USC Cycle said it. I'm tired of people saying he's not a Trojan. He's not a Trojan guy. Like, we need to figure out why they're not coming.
Right.
But in this case, I'm okay with him leaving. I think we're lined up to where if he stays, he stays. If he doesn't stay, I think we'll be all right. What do you think about it?
Yeah, Coach. I mean, we're always going to find sort of the silver lining of being okay. But let's not forget, I mean, we thought this kid was going to be the super recruiter, right? I mean, you said it a lot over the last few months that he's kind of the glue and he's going to do some recruiting for SC and he's going to be the boots on the ground. So in that regard, it is a blow. There's no question.
I didn't think about that part.
I think it's a blow in terms of recruiting the other guys as being boots on the ground. B, I think it's a big blow because he's potentially going to take Cardet with him. And Cardet is the highest ranked offensive lineman in the class of 25 for SC. And obviously, we've talked ad nauseum. We've seen ad nauseum the challenges with the offensive line. And this is a group, obviously, that has recruited last year as well. But we do lose Pregnon. We do lose Monheim. So there's questions about Mason Murphy moving forward. There's questions about Paige's development moving forward, even though he's shown a lot of growth over the last couple of weeks. So there's holes on this offensive line. We've seen the importance even more so of trench play in the Big Ten in a way that we just didn't see in the Pac-12 and the way Lincoln just didn't see in the Big 12. So, A, he's sort of the super recruiter for other kids. B, he's sort of taking Cardet with him. But C, Coach, it's problematic because Lincoln Riley is the quarterback whisperer. And so why wouldn't you want to play for Lincoln Riley? So when you start unpacking the reasons why that's a little bit of a concern that we've sort of walked into a situation saying Lincoln Riley should be able to get any quarterback he wants given his track record. We saw getting struck out a little bit in the winter with Cam Ward. We struck out a little bit with Will Howard in particular. And so, that thinking was along the lines of, okay, maybe USC's NIL isn't up to where it needs to be. So now was this also an NIL situation? And if so, what are the ramifications of that moving forward? Or B, is it just something about Colorado that he's finding particularly attractive? And I think, Coach, it's probably a combination of both. I think that the NIL that Shedeur is getting is sort of ridiculous, right? I mean, On3 and other outlets have sort of estimated his NIL to be over $6 million. I mean, Shedeur is driving a Rolls Royce to practice every day, right? I mean, and so you sort of see that lifestyle. You see what that brand could become. It's hard not to get enamored with it. Now, when you sort of overlay that with the fact that, hey, Shedeur is most probably going to be the number 1 pick in the NFL draft here in the spring. So there's a path to being a very high draft pick. You don't just have to go to USC. You just don't have to be with Lincoln Riley. You can go here and you can maybe build something with Prime and that platform. Look, Coach, if Colorado wins their last 4 games, they're going to the playoff. I mean, Colorado, Deion's going to be in the playoff before Lincoln is. And so, when you start adding all of that stuff up, rightfully or wrongfully, perhaps the place that USC thinks it has with these recruits, or the place that Lincoln in particular thinks he has with these quarterbacks, that gap may not be as wide as we believe it to be. So on the face of it, yeah, if you lose a Julian Lewis, you're just going to have to get more aggressive in the portal, and Lincoln Riley kind of sells himself, so it's not catastrophic. But we have to go into the why. And then beyond that, there's also going to be sort of a desperation of being able to get a guy in the portal too, Coach, because, look, if Miller Moss transfers and Julian Lewis decommits, okay, you have Maeva as your starter, but you have nobody behind him. What happens if he takes a hit? What happens if he gets hurt? What's behind him in 2025? That's also a concern as well. So when it comes to sort of on the boots on the ground recruiting, who he's potentially going to pull with him, the why behind why he's picking another school, as well as depth for 2025. For all of those reasons, Coach, I do think this is a big deal. I don't think the sky is falling, but it is pretty significant. And then the question becomes, if Julian and Carday Smith decommit, does that open the floodgates for others in 2025 to say, hey, you know what? Guess what? This is a 5, 6, 7, 8 win team that now just lost 2 marquee players. I don't know if the future is that bright in 25. Maybe I need to look at my options elsewhere. So there is this domino effect moving forward that could potentially take place.
I did not think about the possibility of the domino effect. I didn't think about that. I was just mostly thinking quarterback roster situation. That's a very valid point. In my opinion, I don't think it's NIL. I don't think it has anything to do with Lincoln Riley being a quarterback whisperer. I think it's more attraction than anything. And I think kids are attracted to going to play in Colorado because they think they're going to get the same thing that Shedeur's getting. They're going to think they're going to get the same thing that Shiloh's getting. They think they're going to get the same thing that Travis Hunter is getting. Proven fact, only those 3 players are getting those types of things.
Right.
You know what I mean? So, and I could be wrong, but there's more negative that comes out of there than positive. We look at the news, we see everything, and maybe the media, people say the media is hating on them or this and that. Doesn't matter. Bad press coming out of your camp is not good press at all. It's not. So, like, if you think you're going there to get Shedeur money, you're not going to get Shedeur money. Prime is not going to look out for you to get Shedeur money. He gave a check to the kids with the players with kids for $2,024 to put in a savings account for those players' kids. All right. Shedeur is making $6 million and driving a Rolls Royce. Shedeur is having girls set up at a coffee shop to pretend like they like him. Like they're making him a focal point. There's no guarantee. There's multiple stories that said that he's playing daddy ball and that he's doing that. There's no guarantee that you're going to get that. At least with Lincoln, you know what you're going to get. Like you,
right.
You know what I'm saying? Like that's just what I'm saying. I think, but attraction, you can't beat attraction with an 18-year-old. Also think that he met a girl there. I think he has a girlfriend there. And if he has a girlfriend there, it's done.
Right. You've said
they're
that.
undefeated. Yeah. It's undefeated. So I think he met a girl there because he went back. Like everybody's I thought about that too. Like, why would he go back on a visit? Like, you're going to go do the same things, but there's something that will bring you back. And it's definitely the opposite sex. So I think that might be a thing too. But the attraction, you can't beat attraction. I really think that it's attraction. And I think attraction is going to get him, is what's the reason why he wants to go there. Lincoln Riley just has to work hard and make XC more attractable.
Right, exactly. And I think, Coach, I mean, obviously there's so much to love about USC. But you also sort of have to wonder, we talk about there's no guarantee of getting Shedeur money 100%, right? I mean, you're not his son. It's just different. You're not the one that is trying to build a program. He's the one. But B, coach, there's no guarantee anywhere. I mean, let's talk about Miller Moss, right? I mean, here's the kid who waited 3 years, bled USC, got 10 starts, and now is kind of been shown the door. I mean, for lack of a better term, and is most likely, based on our sources, is going to transfer at the end of the year. And so, there's no guarantee on that side of the equation either. And coach, to your point, we were told that nil is not going to be a factor with Julian Lewis from the USC side. But when you talk about just the external sponsorships of $6 million, I mean, there's a lot that's kind of being thrown his way for being, Deion's son and, that whole storyline and whatnot. So it's hard for an 18-year-old kid to sort of look at that and say, hey, this might just be kind of a one-off. This is a sort of a unicorn situation. But again, coach, if you see a path to be the number one pick in the draft, there's an opportunity to build something special at Colorado, which is a really beautiful place, a beautiful campus, a really unique place in the country. And we've talked about it, right? I mean, if you take a step back and say, who are the best NFL quarterbacks in the league? Who are the MVPs? Who are the All-Pros? None of those guys went to blue blood schools. Like, if you actually want the best preparation for the NFL, you probably want to kind of elevate a Colorado more so than play at a USC, for instance. Because if you look at Mahomes and you look at Rodgers and you look at Allen and you look at Lamar and you look at all of these guys, you look at what Cam Newton did or Matt Ryan did, or pick any MVP of the NFL over the last 10, 12 years, I mean, none of those guys went to sort of blue chip schools. I mean, even Brady went to Michigan, but he had to share time, right? I mean, so none of those guys went to these blue chip situations. They all were in situations in college where their receivers, their line, their skill position guys were on par with or lesser than the defenses that they played. And then you sort of flip that on its head, like we had talked about, and look at Leinart and Booty and Sanchez, and look at the A.J. McCarrons and the Mac Joneses, and look at, all of these other kids. Look at Stetson Bennett of Georgia. Look at even Trevor Lawrence of Clemson. All of these kids that had all of these advantages, how's it going for them in the NFL, right? It's not exactly the greatest education, even if you do have Lincoln Riley, right? So it becomes very interesting where that's, to me, is kind of the deeper issue. We sort of went into this saying, look, there's questions about Lincoln Riley as a program builder, as a leader of men, understanding trenches, understanding NIL, having an emphasis on defense, caring enough about special teams, all of those things. But we never once have needed to question his offensive mind and his ability to get any quarterback he wants. And now, between not necessarily getting Will Howard, even though Miller Moss's performance in the Holiday Bowl had a lot to do with that, and now not potentially closing on Julian Lewis, who's a guy that we've been recruiting for over a year, there's a little bit of a crack in that veneer moving forward. And so it'll be interesting to see how it plays out.
Yeah, we got, it's about 6 weeks.
Yeah.
We got about 6 weeks. So I feel like I've been saying that for like 2 weeks now. We got about 6 weeks.
We got about 6 weeks, Coach.
That's
also the thing, right, Coach? I mean, that's also why, we report on, the 2026 kids, and we report on who's committing and whatnot. But man, until they sign on that dotted line on National Letter of Intent Day, I mean, anything can happen. These things change so much. Like, we felt like we had Julian Lewis completely locked up. All of our sources, all of our internal people said, we've got him. We're not worried about this at all. And now here we go. For the better part of the year, we felt really good about this. And now, he's swaying right at the end. It just goes to show you that, the commits and the recruiting, I mean, it's a nice news cycle. But until they sign, especially in this day and age, with all that NIL and all the optionality, it is really, it's a very sort of superficial yes until the actual yes happens.
I'll tell you when we have some time, another time, I'll tell you how I spent a lot of time, a lot of hard recruiting, the top linebacker, high school linebacker in the state of New Mexico, how I had him until the week before, and West Texas A&M called him, and I lost him to West Texas A&M. So this has been happening for a long time. You know what I mean? Like, it's so crazy how people are in it now. Like, people see what happens every single day, and they're like, they kind of panic. But it's a normality. You know what I mean? Like, it's a normal thing. But I'll tell you about that story. A lot of hours on that kid, a lot of family time, and I lost that dude at West Texas A&M on a phone call the Wednesday, 7 days before National Signing Day.
Wow.
It's a tough game, man.
It's a tough game. And there's sort of an argument there about Julian Lewis looking at, his playing time, right? As like, he's going to probably get the keys to the kingdom of Colorado right off the bat. Here, he's going to have to compete. If Maeva plays really well over these 3 games, even if he doesn't, he's going to have sort of a leg up there. But the fact, Coach, that this is also happening before we've even seen Maeva's body of work, tells you that, sure, playing time is a factor, but there's other things at play here as well.
It's weird, though, because the one thing that will worry me about it, and we can move on out after this, but the one thing that will worry me about it is, will he get the right coaching as a true freshman back to be successful? And that is very unknown, and that's what's really scary. I don't even know how you could even consider going to a place like that if the coaching is questionable. That's all I'm saying. So we'll leave it there. Moving forward, so we're off bye week, off vacation. Players got healthy. Bodies feel a little bit better. They didn't get beat up. We invite Dylan Raiola, a.k.a. Patrick Mahomes III, Mr. Personality Issues, and the Nebraska Cornhuskers into the Coliseum. I played against them last time they were in the Coliseum. Was that Callahan? Bill Callahan?
Yeah, Callahan, yep.
Bill Callahan, yep. We curb stomped him twice.
Yep.
I actually got knocked out in Lincoln the following year.
That's wild.
So Callahan, last time we played. This is a game of wits. I shouldn't say of wits. I should say more of will. Both of these teams, this is another team where we're looking at ourselves in the mirror. Like, the season's not how we expected it to be. Matt Rule just fired his offensive coordinator. The $3 million quarterback is not playing up to par. SC season's not where it's supposed to be. SC can't fire their coordinator because that means you have to pay $90 million buyout, reportedly. Just everything isn't going. At this point, this is one of those games where you just legit have to look yourself in the mirror and say, what are we going to do? How much pride do I have? Can we win this game? And I don't want to get too in-depth into it because we'll get pretty more in-depth, but we're just going to scratch the surface. But that's just where I am with this game. Like, both teams have to be at the point to where, like, all right, I have to win 2 games to keep my season going or it's over. Like, they got to go out, leave it all on the field for the next 3 weeks. So this is going to be an interesting game, and I'm kind of excited to see where we go from here and what the Trojans do. They got a new quarterback on the Trojan side. Nebraska has a new offensive coordinator, so we'll see scheme-wise. What a very smart play caller in Dana Holgerson. So I'll be interested to see what happens. What do you have on this game, Matt, man?
Yeah, Coach. I mean, I think you said it best. I think the bye week comes at the ideal time for both of them, right? Because it's an opportunity to reset. Nebraska reminds me a lot of just situationally when SC is playing them, a lot of the way Rutgers came into the Coliseum. Rutgers was coming off of a 3-game losing streak playing SC. Nebraska's coming off of a 3-game losing streak playing SC. Rutgers had just lost to UCLA at home and then flies to USC. Nebraska just lost to UCLA at home and now has to fly and play USC. So there's a lot of questions about kind of energy, momentum, and just where the psyche is of this Nebraska Cornhuskers team. And I think both teams are sort of hitting the reset button. Obviously, it's the beginning of the Maeva era at USC. But on the flip side, Coach, with Nebraska, there's questions about whether or not Raiola is even going to play. He got knocked out of that UCLA game. Seems like it's going to be a more serious thing than, they were sort of presuming earlier. So he may not be able to play this game. And then, of course, you got Dana as the new offensive coordinator. And he's had a lot of success as an offensive mind with Houston, with West Virginia, and in other places. So how quickly can he sort of install some explosiveness to this offense that really, Coach, the last couple of weeks has looked absolutely lost. Raiola has looked so lost offensively. They failed to score 20 points over the last 4 games, and they just don't know what they want to do or what their identity is or what their strategy is offensively. So it'll be interesting to see how quickly this team sort of adopts to a new offensive system, who their quarterback is going to be, and then on the flip side, with Maeva and SC, how they're going to sort of install their system with this unique skill set. I think, Coach, in a lot of ways, the game's going to come down to balance. I think the games where Nebraska has really struggled is when quarterbacks play with a lot of precision and there's a lot of balance, run-pass balance. Like, it's about 30-30, 28-32 in terms of throw-run. And you've got quarterbacks that are, completing easier passes, 75%, 20 for 28, peppering the ball around, keeping them off balance. You don't know who's going to get the ball, and you don't know whether you're going to run or throw. You're going to really kind of keep these linebackers off balance, because I think Nebraska has some talented physical linebackers, but they're limited in athleticism. They're really good sort of downhill linebackers, so they're really good at sort of crashing the box. And so if teams are sort of struggling to sort of throw the ball and they're going to be more run-heavy, Nebraska's sort of black shirts defense is going to swarm to the ball and be really good. They're going to pack the box, and those linebackers are really going to sort of crash the line of scrimmage and go downhill and really clog up various gaps of the defensive line. But if you are able to sort of pepper in the throw and be able to keep a lot of balance, they struggle over the top. They struggle in pass coverage. They struggle in open space. They struggle moving laterally. And so that's where a lot of teams have been able to get Nebraska. That's how Indiana really sort of lit them up. That's how UCLA kind of lit them up. That's how even earlier in the season, Illinois, played really well against them. So I think that's going to be the key for Lincoln moving forward. As much as we are enamored with Maeva's athleticism and the ability for him to sort of open up in terms of running from an RPO perspective, I think it's going to be really important to see how Maeva dissects this defense from a pass perspective and how Lincoln maintains balance. Because I'll tell you, if Lincoln sort of limits the playbook from a pass perspective and goes run heavy, which we've never seen Lincoln go run heavy, so I don't even know what that looks like, but let's assume he goes sort of run heavy because he wants to sort of slow roll the playbook for Maeva, and it's, absorbing the concepts, maybe taking a little bit longer, and you just want to sort of lean into Maeva's athleticism with Woody Marks and have kind of that two-headed monster. Truthfully, Coach, that's going to play into Nebraska's hands because those linebackers are going to want to see more run. Even if it is disguised run, that linebacking group is much more comfortable in run situations than they are in pass situations and in balance situations. So that, to me, Coach, and we'll get much more into it later in the week, but it's going to be that cat and mouse offensively for USC. Make sure that they have balance against this Nebraska defense. And then on the flip side, what Nebraska offense is going to show up? What is their scheme going to be? What is their system? Who their quarterback is going to be? That will be fascinating to see unfold.
So this is interesting, and I just looked it up while you were talking. I wanted to see if this was if they were on the same tree, but Riley and Hogerson are on the same tree.
Yeah,
they're both Mike Leach guys.
Yep.
I didn't even know that. Which they were at Texas Tech. I don't think they were at Texas Tech together, but they're both Mike Leach guys, which I guess could play into our hands a little bit, just because Dana's going to be really basic. But man, we got to win this game.
No doubt about it, Coach.
Like we got to win this game. Like there's no more I could say about it. Like we got to win this game. Next week is going to be a hell of a game, right? And then Notre Dame is playing for a playoff.
Notre Dame's playing for a playoff berth. I mean, they're playing with everything on the line. And Notre Dame, between Leonard, Riley, and that running game, I mean, they know exactly who they are. And they're going to be pound, pound, pound. And obviously our defense has shown an ability to sort of wilt with the bigger backs. We've talked about it as a theme all season. Yeah. So that is going to be staring us directly in the face with the desperate Notre Dame team that wants to close out this season and get into the playoff. And then the week prior, Coach, to your point, we'll see what happens here on Friday with UCLA and Washington. But UCLA is going to be sort of either a team that's on a 4-game heater and arguably the hottest team in the Big Ten, or having lost to Washington, sitting at 4-6, needing to win both games to get the bowl game and going to treat this like the Super Bowl. So either way, it's going to be two intense rivalry games from the perspective of the rival. And so is SC going to be able to sort of match that intensity? And so you want to be in a position where all you got to do is split those rivalry games, because if you drop this game, now you're going to have to beat both rivals just to get to the 6 wins. And given where we sit right now. Obviously, we want to see what Maeva can do and how much of life and energy he can inject into this offense, into this team, the way Miller did in the Holiday Bowl last year. But sitting right now, that seems sort of unlikely that this team is going to win both rivalry games. So I'm with you, Coach. This is a must-win, but it's also sort of a mysterious game because we don't know what USC is going to be with Maeva, and we have no idea what Nebraska is going to be with this new offensive system and who their quarterback is going to be. So this is going to be a really interesting game of cat and mouse, and I think the coaching staff that can make the in-game adjustments faster is going to be the team that invariably is going to have success. It's not necessarily going to be what's your game plan going into the game because there's so many unknowns. It's your ability to make those in-game adjustments. That's going to be one of these games against Nebraska.
There's 3 probabilities that can happen with these last 3 games. 2 out of the 3 result in SC not making a bowl game. That's a problem. You know what I mean? Like, one probability, which is the silver lining, is that they win out, right? They win out and they make so there's 4 probabilities. I'm sorry. Right. They could win 3 straight games and then all of a sudden they end up 7-4 or 7-5. They could lose 1 game, no bowl game. They could lose 2 games, no bowl game. They could win 2 games, lose another game. They end up in a bowl game. So we'll see, man. We got some time to ponder on it. We got some time to think about it. We could, get a little bit more stories out, figure out what's going to happen with Patrick Mahomes III, see how good it's going to be. Until then, I think we just reconvene about the Cornhuskers on Thursday.
On Thursday, absolutely, Coach.
And hopefully we have a victory Sunday. So
yes, sir.
Yep. Man, it's been a good one. I think we put some good stuff in the books here in under an hour. So I think we got a lot done, got a lot said, and another great show with you. All you guys who want to see all those good stories written by Madman and written by Ryan, you can go to lafbnetwork.com. We have the Trojans, we have the Rams, we have the Chargers, we have the other team across town. We also got baseball and basketball, Lakers, Dodgers, and collegiate basketball coming up. I'm going to fight not to do the Angels because they aren't in L.A., so I'm going to keep that fight going. They're not even in L.A. County. Anyway, also, if you want to get into fantasy, if you are in fantasy football and want to know who to sit, who to start, go check out my man Amar Desai and Tad Desai on this side, guys. They got everything fantasy football for you guys. Bet Online Switcher Podcast. Go to BetOnline.ag where the game starts and Underdog Fantasy. Put in promo code USCLAFB. Man, it's a good one. It's great. Enjoy the rest of your evening. And you know how it goes. Live free. Fight on.